So the former Republican governor of Kentucky, Matt Bevin, issued around 400 or so pardons before he left office, and some of the people he pardoned have been convicted of doing some really horrible things, and Bevin's justification for pardoning some, for example, people who have been convicted of raping children is very troubling. So he was questioned about pardoning this one individual who was convicted of raping a 9-year-old child, and the reason that he said he pardoned this individual first was that he believed in second chances, and also he then went back and said after the fact that he didn't believe this particular victim. They thought they were lying about being raped, and additionally he pointed out the fact that this 9-year-old's hymen was still intact, and he's going off of the debunked assumption that there would be some type of damage to the hymen if this child had been in fact been raped or sexually abused, but that's totally wrong and inaccurate. In this Washington Post article, which I'll leave in the comment sections down below, they mention that a peer-reviewed survey of pediatric sexual abuse cases showed only physical or visual damage to the hymen in 2.1% of cases. So, Matt Bevin, in justifying pardoning this convicted child rapist, was going off of this, horribly misinformed notion, as well as saying that he didn't believe this 9-year-old child who said that they had been raped. And then, the case went through the trial process. This particular person was convicted. And then he also, this is another case, he also pardoned Mika Shoeti, who was sentenced to 23 years in prison for a 2008 rape of a child. This child was also related to them, so convicted on incest and sodomy charges. And so Bevin also released this person. They won't have to register as a sex offender along with the other rapists that, he pardoned. So these people will be, able to interact in the community, work with kids potentially, because they aren't, convicted of, any crime at this point. They've been pardoned for that. And, additionally, it just shows, a lot of these people, it seemed, had some type of connection to the campaign, or their friends or family members did. So, for example, Bevin pardoned Patrick Brian Barber. He was pardoned. He was serving 19 years for a reckless homicide charge, and so his brother and sister-in-law held a fundraiser for Bevin where they raised around $21,000 that they gave to the Bevin campaign to pay back some of the debts incurred during the 2015 campaign. So this person, this Patrick Brian Barber, was pardoned for a homicide, or for a murder charge for killing somebody, after his family was able to, wrangle up $20,000+ to give to the Bevin campaign. And Bevin has came out and said that, I interact with tens of thousands of people, and, there's no political motivation for these pardons, even though it seems like there's very strong evidence that there is. And so there's been lawmakers from both sides of the aisle calling for an investigation into these really shady and suspicious looking pardons that Bevin handed out before leaving office, because he obviously wasn't reelected. The Democrat Andy Beshear took over Bevin's position, and there's actually a Kentucky state representative that was saying they've already been questioned by some type of law enforcement agency about these pardons. This person didn't mention what law enforcement agency, but there has been talk that the FBI has already kind of started poking around these pardons and asking questions. So it's, a very good chance that it was somebody from the FBI has already kind of started to look into this. But, obviously, like, how horrible is it, especially for the, victims of these crimes? The Washington Post article mentions a parent of one of these child sexual abuse cases, and how the family is very, scared and worried now about what's going to happen. They're going to have to, file for a, emergency protection order against, this convicted rapist who raped, their child, and all of the, healing or attempt to heal that was taking place while this person had been convicted. All of that's going to, come back to the surface because, what seems to be politically motivated pardons by Matt Bevin to some really, people convicted of some of the most horrible crimes imaginable, because there's not really much worse in my mind than, people who are, convicted of child sexual abuse, and just the long-lasting trauma how that will impact those, children who have been, sexually abused. And now that's not to say that I'm not against, pardoning people if they have, let's say, been wrongly convicted, or if there was some shady business going on with the prosecution, or evidence was mishandled, or they didn't have a fair trial, or somebody else ended up saying they committed the crime, or whatever it is. And I'm all for lenient prison sentences, and don't really want people in prison in the first place. But I mean, definitely appears that these are politically motivated pardons that Bevin handed out, and he's handing them out to, people convicted of some of the most serious crimes out there, like, child sexual abuse and murder, homicide, and it definitely seems to be politically motivated. So it'll be really interesting to see what comes out about these, if there is any type of prosecution or case that gets levied against Bevin for handing out what seems to be some very shady and politically motivated pardons, several hundred of them. And it's not to say that they were all politically motivated, but it definitely seems like there's a good amount of evidence that at least a decent amount of them are. And even if it was only 10, that's still 10 child rapists and murderers that are going to be back out on the street, and they might be able to kill more people or rape more children. So it's like, not a very good look, Matt Bevin. And especially your reasoning for pardoning the child rapist was that you didn't believe the victim in that case. You thought they were lying, and as well as that they still had their hymen intact, when if you dig any type of like research or anything into that, you could have easily found that like it already cited, only in about 2% of pediatric sexual abuse cases is the child's hymen actually, damaged, or there's any visible damage to it. So he's just, citing just BS basically in order to try to justify these really horrible looking pardons that he handed out before leaving office. But time will tell what happens, and we will have to wait and see. Peace.